Okay, let's dive right into this explainer with a story that is frankly just absolutely unbelievable. Picture this, right? You've got a mother elephant in Kenya walking across the savannah with two companions, and all three of them have poison-tipped arrows buried in their sides courtesy of poachers. So they're in serious pain, they're bleeding, and honestly, they have every reason in the world to avoid anything even remotely resembling a human being for the rest of their natural lives. But they do the exact opposite. They walk directly toward a human wildlife rescue center. Literally, not away from it, but straight toward it. And why? Well, it turns out one of the three had previously mated with two former orphans who were raised and released by that exact facility. So this elephant somehow associated that specific patch of dirt and the very species responsible for shooting her with the concept of help. This isn't some campfire myth. It actually happened, it was documented, photographed, the whole shebang. And it perfectly sets up one of the strangest, most mind-bending facts in the animal kingdom.
Which brings us to our core paradox, the planet's most dangerous predator versus the animal kingdom's last hope. I mean, think about it. Why would creatures with every single biological and evolutionary reason to fear us, we are the deadliest predator on Earth, hands down, sometimes walk straight toward us when they're in desperate trouble? We hunt them, we displace them, we make their lives incredibly difficult. Yet when everything hits the fan, they don't seek out another member of their own species, they seek us. So what on earth makes an animal decide that humans are exactly the right creature to approach in a crisis? Well, to figure that out, we actually need to look at some genuinely rigorous, peer-reviewed science.
Section 1. The honeyguide experiment. A wild bird recruits us. Let's look at the hard science and see how this whole cooperation thing builds. We're going to start with this incredibly fascinating little creature called the greater honeyguide, found over in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, this is a wild bird that absolutely loves beeswax, but it physically cannot break into a beehive. Bees are dangerous, right? Humans, on the other hand, well, we have fire and tools, even if we are pretty terrible at actually finding hidden hives in the wild. So through pure evolutionary pragmatism, this bird literally recruits humans. It finds a hive, flies over to a honey hunter, calls out super loudly, and physically leads them right to the nest. The human cracks the hive, takes the honey, and leaves the wax for the bird. It's a perfect trade. And if you look at the hard data from a 2016 study led by Claire Spottiswoode in Mozambique, it gets even crazier. Local honey hunters there use a very specific, generational vocal call to summon the bird. When researchers played that exact call, instead of just random control sounds, it doubled the bird's willingness to guide, jumping from a 33% chance to a 66% probability. And even better, it increased the human success rate of actually finding a nest from 17% all the way up to 54%. So the bird wasn't just reacting to random noise, it was attaching real, functional meaning to a specific human signal.
And as the researchers perfectly summarized it, and I absolutely love this quote, this is one of the only known examples on Earth of a genuinely wild animal engaging in active, learned, mutually beneficial cooperation with humans. The key word there is wild. This isn't a pet. It isn't trained with treats. We're talking about bidirectional communication that developed completely independent of any human attempt to tame the animal. Which, of course, leads us to a pretty fascinating question about how these animals actually perceive us. Section 2. Inside the animal mind. Cognition and intention. This raises a slightly uncomfortable but deeply fascinating question. What is actually happening, cognitively speaking, inside the animal's brain when it asks a human for help? Well, the most basic explanation is pure learned association, right? Basically, step 1, human presence. Step 2, distress. Step 3, relief. An animal has maybe previously experienced a human offering relief during a moment of distress, and it just connects those dots. It doesn't require the animal to have this deep philosophical understanding of human intentions. It's just a heavily reinforced behavioral link. Humans plus distress equals relief. Simple as that. However, a much higher cognitive par is something called the theory of mind and referential communication. Basically, this is a sophisticated understanding that humans have separate goals and intentions, allowing animals to interpret deliberate signals. We actually see this with dogs all the time in controlled lab settings. Using eye tracking tech, researchers found that dogs respond super strongly when a human points at an object while looking directly at them in what's called an ostensive manner, meaning a deliberate signal of, hey, I am trying to tell you something. The dog interprets the gesture as meaningful. That's referential communication. So if a distressed wild animal has even a rudimentary sense of this, that humans are an independent agents capable of purposeful action, then approaching us isn't just a random fluke. It becomes a calculated, intelligent strategy.
Section 3. Incredible encounters in the wild, defying every instinct. Okay, let's dive into some documented field evidence here. Because I know, while the laboratory science is compelling, the sheer breadth of these stories from out in the real world can honestly sound more like campfire folklore than peer-reviewed biology. But I assure you, these events are very, very real.
Wildlife rehabilitators and researchers consistently report this phenomenon across a massive, honestly surprising range of species. It's not just your famously intelligent animals like elephants or primates. We see it in marine life, in birds, in apex predators like coyotes, wolves, bears, and cougars, and even in naturally skittish prey like deer. The pattern is incredibly consistent across the board.
Take this story, for example. Off the coast of Hawaii, a bottlenose dolphin approached a group of scuba divers. Now, its swimming was unmistakably awkward, very labored. It kept circling this one diving instructor, a guy named Keller Laros. Well, it turned out the dolphin had swallowed a fish hook and was tangled completely tight in fishing line. So Laros carefully cuts it free. And what's absolutely amazing is that once freed, the dolphin didn't just bolt. It surfaced for a quick breath and then deliberately came right back down and faced the diver directly in what witnesses basically interpreted as an acknowledgement or a gesture of thanks before it finally swam off. We see something very similar with birds, too. Consider the case of a wild raven that perched on a rural fence and squawked persistently for over an hour, just wouldn't stop. When someone finally came out to see what the commotion was, they saw the poor bird had 4 porcupine quills painfully embedded in its face and wing. And this totally wild bird allowed a complete stranger to walk right up to it and physically pull those quills out one by one. It tolerated sustained human contact that, honestly, every single survival instinct it possessed should have been screaming at it to avoid. In another incredible instance, an Indian elephant faced an absolute nightmare scenario. Her calf had fallen into a deep, man-made watering hole and just couldn't climb out. The mother, obviously in escalating distress, actually approached a nearby road. She made these clear, repeated, unmistakable overtures to passing humans, and literally refused to leave until she successfully led a group of people all the way back to the watering hole. They ended up organizing a rescue and pulling her calf to safety.
And if you really want to grasp the sheer scale of the trust involved here, think about this. 20 minutes. Off the coast of Australia, a whale shark, an animal roughly the size of a yellow school bus, swam up to a boat and floated completely motionless for a full 20 minutes. It stayed perfectly still while a diver removed a tightly wound rope from its body. I mean, this was functionally a genuine act of veterinary care on a wild leviathan, performed with absolutely zero anesthesia and no physical restraints whatsoever. Just mind-blowing.
Or take a highly specific, kind of strange case from Russia. A wild fox somehow got its head hopelessly stuck inside a glass jar. Now, instead of hiding in a panic, it wandered directly up to a group of men standing nearby and just stood there, waiting. One of the men carefully removed the jar entirely by hand, and the fox, it just cheerfully trotted back into the forest, pausing briefly for a quick glance back before disappearing for good.
And look, even naturally skittish prey animals display this behavior. In the freezing waters of Alaska's Stevens Passage, 4 young wild deer were exhausted and literally drowning. Spotting an unfamiliar boat in the distance, all 4 of them swam directly and deliberately toward it to be pulled aboard. They swam straight toward a vessel full of primates. That overrides literally every single instinct a deer has around humans. But, you know, when the alternative is drowning, the underlying calculation shifts pretty instantly.
Section 4. Overriding the fear instinct, the calculated risk. So what exactly allows these wildly diverse animals to just suddenly suppress thousands of years of deeply ingrained fear?
The core takeaway here is that a wild animal's baseline weariness of humans isn't some fixed, unbreakable rule. It's more of a default setting, calibrated by millennia of evolutionary pressure. But as we've seen, default settings can be overwritten. When extreme desperation hits, the calculated risk of approaching a human suddenly becomes genuinely smaller than the near-certain, immediate risk of doing absolutely nothing. The overwhelming threat of us is suddenly eclipsed by the sheer reality of their pain.
There's also a deep evolutionary and social transmission of trust at play here. Like we talked about, the honeyguide passes down its cooperative strategy generationally because it's proven evolutionarily useful over time. But highly intelligent animals, like those elephants, use sophisticated social learning. They pass down these carefully carved-out exceptions about specific safe humans or safe organizations through their matriarchal lines. They remember that a particular type of human in a particular place means relief, not danger. Now, actually, let me pause here. As much as we absolutely love these heartwarming stories, we have to avoid anthropomorphism. The cold scientific reality is that we cannot project rich human emotions onto this. An exhausted animal might just be drawn to the physical stillness of a boat or the simple absence of an immediate danger signal in its environment. It might not possess some complex cinematic internal narrative about humans acting as their majestic saviors.
But given the hard science of the honeyguide, it becomes highly plausible that something profound really is happening. In dire moments of overwhelming pain, animals separated by tens of millions of years of independent evolution seem to arrive at the exact same desperate decision. When everything else fails, it's a calculated risk. They figure they simply have absolutely nothing left to lose by trying.
So, to wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this powerful question. We have spent so much of our shared evolutionary history teaching wild animals to fear us. Yet, what does it say about our shared existence on this planet that, in their absolute darkest moments when the pain is just too much to bear, the animal kingdom occasionally gambles that we, their greatest threat, might just be exactly what they need? It's a paradox that should forever change how we view our place in the natural world.